Hello, it's Kayla and welcome back to my channel yet again. Today I wanted to talk about the best audiobooks that I've ever read. I have 5 different audiobooks that I read / listened to and really enjoyed. I'm not the biggest fan of listening to audiobooks. I will prefer physical or at the very least an ebook because I just don't enjoy the reading experience as much. It is so different listening to an audiobook in comparison to actually reading the physical book. Like, I feel like I can't quite connect to the story, if that makes sense. But these books that I have for you today are one of the few that I actually connected with and thoroughly enjoyed. So let's just get into it. I'm gonna start from one of the first audiobooks I've read going to the most recent. So the first one I have on my list is The Silent Waters by Brittany C. Cherry. This was recommended to me by one of my co-workers and she reads a lot of audiobooks, and this is also one of her favorites just because the writing is so beautiful, the narration is amazing, and the story itself is so heart-wrenching and emotional, and it's all the feels. It's not necessarily like a romantic romance, kind of like a rom-com-y style. It is more of a drama. So The Silent Waters is actually the 3rd book in what I believe is a trilogy. I've only read one of the other books, so I kind of read it backwards, but you don't necessarily need to read them in order. It can be a standalone. It follows our 2 main characters, Maggie and Brooks, and it follows sort of their friendship and their romance blooming as they grow up. We start off with Maggie, who is this happy-go-lucky girl, and then she has a traumatic experience that leaves her mute for most of her life, most of her early life. We go through the novel knowing what happened, but knowing that the choices she's made and the reason that she's mute has severely affected her life and her relationships. She's scared, she's a worried person now, but she has Brooks. They have their friendship, they have their romance, but they both have their issues. They look out for each other and they take care of one another, and it's just beautiful to watch their friendship and their romance grow throughout the story. It's almost like a coming of age kind of story where we get to see them from a young age, and then as they grow up, it's kind of like that, and we get to see like the experiences they have together and separately and what their lives are like, and it's just told really beautifully. It's a unique kind of story and it's so emotional. Like, there's so many moments in there you just want to cry. I listened to this book on Audible and it's narrated by Erin Mallon and Joe Arden, and they were perfect. The voices were spot on. It was just captivating. You know, you need a perfect narration to tell a story like this, a heavy but beautiful story, and I loved it for my first audiobook. The next one I've actually spoken about on this channel a couple of times, and that is Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. I really love this series. I'm yet to read the last book, but I've listened to all of the other books on Scribed and I've loved every single one. And this is narrated by Cynthia Hopkins. I think she did an absolutely amazing job to paint a picture of the story and the characters. Like I said, I've spoken about this before, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but Every Heart a Doorway follows our main character, Nancy, and she has just come from an absolutely crazy world that she's been in for quite a few years, and she's having trouble adjusting to her normal life, so she gets sent to Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children, which is essentially a boarding school for kids who've come back from certain different worlds and have trouble trying to adjust and need to get back into their normal lives because they've been away from the world for so long. You know, they've been in different worlds like Narnia and Wonderland and Neverland, Oz, there's so many different worlds. Like, it's an endless array of worlds. And Nancy is readjusting and meeting all these other people who've had the same experiences and trying to see if they can somehow get back to their world. I read this one because it was only a short book. I think it was about 3 or 4 hours listening time, which was fine. And I listened to it and I didn't want it to end. It's such a poetic story. Like, Seanan McGuire's writing is absolutely astounding. It is so beautiful. I love the way that she writes, and this particular story is one that you can really relate to, because it's almost feeling like growing up you've got to get out of that like imagination sort of stage, but it also keeps your imagination alive and like the belief of magic and other worlds and things like that. And it's just a beautiful story, and I really enjoyed listening to it. The next series that I listened to on Scribd was To All the Boys I Loved Before by Jenny Han. This was narrated by Laura Knight Keating, and I think she's narrated all of them as well. I read and listened to this whole series in a week. It was awesome. It was so much fun. I really love this series. I do wish I'd read the physical books, but it was actually, I don't know, it was just a lot of fun to listen to. And like I said, the narration really makes it so. I really enjoyed her narration in this series. If you don't know what To All the Boys I Loved Before is about, we follow our main character Lara Jean, who has written all these different letters to her crushes in the past, and then they accidentally get sent out to her crushes, and it just starts a whole lot of craziness. But it's really sweet and fun, and it's just like a typical high school romantic comedy. The first and second movie are now up on Netflix. I did like the second movie, but I enjoyed the book more. I definitely really loved listening to them on audiobook. I do want to get the physical copies, but I feel like because I'm so used to the voices now from the narrator, it's not going to be the same experience, which is fine. I like different experiences, but it was just such a fun experience to listen to. It was literally like watching a movie, and this was obviously before the movie came out, so it was nice and it was fun and I loved it. So the next one I listened to was actually a non-fiction, and that's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, a counterintuitive approach to living a good life. This surprised me because generally I'm not a big fan of self-help books unless they're good for like mental health. Like, I read, it was like The Secret, but it was for teenagers, and I read that when I was growing up, and that really helped through high school, whereas this one really helps for now. And I'm sure you've probably heard bits and pieces about it, but it's kind of like a reverse self-help book. It's trying to tell you to stop being selfish, and I guess to put yourself in other people's shoes. It's a really roundabout way of helping you think better and get your life back on track and realize what you want out of life. And I really love that. I love the way that it's just straight and blunt, and it was really eye-opening. Like, honestly, if you feel like you're stuck, if you're in a rut, you know, if you feel like your thinking is not the way you should be thinking, definitely read this. I believe the sequel is out too. I can't think of what the sequel is called, but I haven't read that one. I've only read the first one. If you feel like you need something to change your way of thinking, check out this book, because it really does change the way you think. The author is Mark Manson, and it is narrated by Roger Wayne, and that is on Scribd as well. And the last one is definitely a more recent one. I only read this like a couple of weeks ago, and that's Confess by Colleen Hoover, and it's narrated by Sebastian York, and I can't remember the female narrator name. I mainly focus on Sebastian York because I've listened to his stuff before, and he has an amazing narrating voice. So in this one, we follow our two main characters, Auburn and Owen. Owen is an artist, and Auburn is struggling to get through life. She has a lot of issues. She's going through a lot of crap, and she meets Owen, who gives her a job for one night, and that's sort of how their connection starts. And his art is based around confessions. So people will drop confessions by his house, and he will turn them into paintings. It actually turns out that these confessions are sent in from real people. So real people out there have sent in confessions for Colleen Hoover's book. That adds to the wonderfulness that is this book, but I really enjoyed this. I did not want to stop reading it because there was just something so intriguing about it. Like, you think you know how the story is going to go, and then it just keeps getting more dramatic, getting more exciting. I read Colleen Hoover's books a while ago and then I just stopped. So this is the first one I've picked up in a long time and I really enjoyed it. It was just so beautiful. When it finished, I didn't know what to do with myself. I was lost and emotional. In this story, you get to see that people are messy and things aren't just black and white. There's always going to be drama, there's always going to be complications, and sometimes sharing a confession can make things worse. That's essentially what this story is about. You know, when is it okay to share something? Like, it's complicated in that fact, but I really enjoyed it, and like I said, the narration was awesome. I really want to read another Colleen Hoover book because I have honestly missed reading her stuff, but I did really enjoy Confess, and the audiobook was a whole different experience. There you go, guys. Those are the 5 audiobooks that I really enjoyed. Let me know what your take is on audiobooks as well. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.